Hello and welcome to IEMC Radio and Podcast. Let's explore the top news headlines today, March 10th. We're starting off with some concerning developments on the Korean Peninsula. North Korea has launched multiple ballistic missiles, their first such test since President Trump returned to office.
Right, and this comes amidst the ongoing U.S.-South Korea military drills, which North Korea sees as a hostile act. What's interesting to me here is how this missile launch could be a calculated move by Kim Jong-un, almost like he's trying to grab President Trump's attention right out of the gate.
Yeah.
It's a way of flexing their military muscle and signaling that they're not going to be ignored on the world stage, especially with these joint military drills going on, which always seem to heighten tensions in the region.
Yeah, and speaking of those drills, there's been a troubling incident on the South Korean side. South Korean fighter jets accidentally bombed a town near the border during these exercises, injuring a number of civilians. It really makes you think about the risks involved in these large-scale military operations, even when they're intended for training purposes.
Absolutely. It's a stark reminder that even with advanced technology and highly trained personnel, accidents can happen, and the consequences can be devastating. And in a situation as volatile as the Korean Peninsula, any misstep could potentially escalate into something far more serious.
Right. Shifting gears to North America, Canada has a new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, who's known for his strong economic background. And he's already made waves by taking a firm stance against President Trump's trade policies, vowing to keep tariffs on American goods in place.
Yeah, this is a bold move by Carney, especially considering the close economic ties between Canada and the U.S. It suggests he's willing to play hardball with President Trump and stand up for what he sees as Canada's best interests. It'll be fascinating to see how this trade dispute plays out and what impact it has on the economies of both countries.
Meanwhile, in Nigeria, there are concerns about the country's economic health. Export numbers have hit a 3-year low under President Tinubu, dropping significantly from the previous year.
Yeah, this decline in exports, coupled with lower import values, paints a worrying picture for the Nigerian economy. It suggests they're facing challenges both internally and in terms of their competitiveness on the global market. It'll be crucial for President Tinubu's administration to address these economic issues and work towards stimulating growth and stability.
And adding to the economic concerns in Nigeria, there's a scandal brewing that has many people outraged. Dates donated by Saudi Arabia for free distribution during Ramadan are reportedly being sold in markets at inflated prices.
Right. This was meant to be an act of charity, providing food for those in need during the holy month. This is a deeply concerning situation where a charitable act seems to have been exploited for personal gain. It raises serious questions about accountability and transparency in the aid distribution system. And ultimately, it's the most vulnerable who suffer when aid intended for them ends up being diverted or misused.
In a story that raises concerns about free speech and political targeting, a Palestinian graduate student at Columbia University, Mahmoud Khalil, has been arrested by U.S. immigration agents.
This arrest seems to be part of President Trump's ongoing crackdown on individuals and groups he deems anti-Israel. However, this case raises concerns about whether criticism of Israeli policies is being unfairly equated with anti-Semitism and used to stifle legitimate dissent. It's a complex issue with implications for both free speech and the right to political expression.
Back in Nigeria, there are conflicting reports about the movement of suspected terrorists. Security analysts are warning that terrorists have relocated from Zamfara State to Kwara State following military crackdowns. However, the police deny these claims, creating uncertainty and confusion.
Yeah, this discrepancy in information is troubling because it leaves the public unsure about the level of threat they may be facing. Clear and consistent communication from authorities is crucial in situations like this to ensure public safety and avoid unnecessary panic. It also highlights the need for reliable intelligence and effective coordination between security agencies.
And speaking of security concerns, there's been yet another breach of U.S. airspace this time, involving President Trump's Lago estate in Florida. Fighter jets were scrambled to intercept a civilian aircraft that entered restricted airspace, marking the 20th such incident since President Trump took office.
Wow, the frequency of these airspace breaches over Mar-a-Lago is alarming and raises serious questions about the effectiveness of security protocols. While some incidents may be attributed to pilot error, the sheer number suggests there may be systemic vulnerabilities that need to be addressed to ensure the president's safety and security.
In Oyo State, Nigeria, there's a clash of cultures brewing, highlighting the complexities of navigating tradition and modern rights. Yoruba Nation activist Sunday Igboho has condemned calls for the arrest of the Alaafin of Oyo designate Akeem Owode. This follows Owode's imposition of a curfew in Oyo town ahead of his coronation. a move criticized by an Islamic group as infringing on residents' rights.
This situation highlights the challenges of balancing traditional practices with individual rights and freedoms in a diverse society. It raises the question of how to respect cultural customs while also ensuring that everyone's rights are protected, regardless of their religious beliefs or cultural background.
And finally, a late-night incident near the White House has put security measures back in the spotlight. Secret Service agents shot an armed man who was reportedly approaching the White House perimeter. The man, described as suicidal, was hospitalized, and investigations are underway to determine the circumstances surrounding the incident.
This incident serves as a stark reminder of the constant security challenges faced in protecting high-profile locations like the White House. It also raises questions about the adequacy of security protocols and the need for vigilance in preventing potential threats. Furthermore, the fact that the man was reportedly suicidal adds another layer to the story, highlighting the importance of mental health awareness and access to support services.
That wraps up part 1 of our exploration of today's top news headlines. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve deeper into some of these stories and explore their potential implications.
Yeah, let's go back to that situation in North Korea for a second. This missile launch coming so soon after President Trump's return to office, really raises the stakes. It's almost like Kim Jong-un is trying to test the waters and see how the U.S. will react under this new administration. And with those U.S.-South Korea military drills happening at the same time, it creates a very, volatile atmosphere.
Yeah, it's like walking a tightrope in a hurricane.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you have that tragic incident with the South Korean jets accidentally bombing their own town. It just shows how quickly things can spiral out of control in that region.
Oh, absolutely. It just underscores the potential for miscalculation and the devastating consequences that can follow. Even with the best training and technology, human error is always a factor. And in a high-pressure environment like the Korean Peninsula, the margin for error is incredibly slim.
Now, shifting focus to Canada and their new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, he's certainly not shying away from confrontation. His decision to maintain those tariffs on American goods is a bold move, especially considering the economic interdependence between the two countries.
It's a high-stakes gamble, that's for sure. Carney is betting that President Trump will be more willing to negotiate if he feels the economic pressure. But there's also the risk that it could backfire and escalate the trade war, further hurting both economies in the process.
It's a delicate balancing act, trying to stand your ground without triggering a full-blown trade war. And speaking of economic challenges, the situation in Nigeria is raising concerns. Those declining export numbers suggest they're struggling to compete on the global market, and that has implications for their overall economic health.
It's a complex issue with multiple factors at play, including internal economic policies, global market trends, and competition from other exporting nations. President Tinubu's administration is facing a real challenge in trying to turn things around and stimulate economic growth.
And it doesn't help when you have scandals like that one with the Saudi-donated dates eroding public trust. You have this generous act of charity meant to help those in need during Ramadan, and then it gets exploited for profit.
Yeah, it's a betrayal of trust on multiple levels. It undermines faith in the aid distribution system, raises questions about corruption, and ultimately it deprives those who are supposed to benefit from the donation. It really underscores the need for transparency and accountability in aid programs to ensure that resources reach their intended recipients.
And then you have that arrest of Mahmoud Khalil at Columbia University, which raises questions about the limits of free speech. The government is justifying it by citing his alleged support for Hamas, but critics are concerned that it's an attempt to silence dissenting voices.
Yeah, this case touches on a very sensitive issue. The balance between national security concerns and the protection of individual rights, particularly the right to free speech and political expression. It's crucial to ensure that individuals are not being targeted or silenced simply for expressing views that may be critical of government policies, even if those views are controversial.
It's a slippery slope when you start using national security as a justification to restrict dissenting opinions. And speaking of conflicting information, those conflicting reports about the movement of terrorists in Nigeria create a dangerous level of uncertainty.
Absolutely. When you have security analysts warning of a potential threat and the police denying those claims, it leaves the public in a state of confusion and distrust. It's essential for authorities to be transparent and provide clear, accurate information to the public, especially when it comes to matters of public safety. The lack of clear communication can lead to fear, panic, and a sense of vulnerability.
And it also makes it difficult for people to make informed decisions about their own safety if they're not sure who to believe. Now, those repeated airspace breaches over Lago, it's hard to believe that it's happened 20 times since President Trump took office. It raises serious questions about the adequacy of security measures around the president, even in his private residence.
It's a concerning pattern that suggests there may be vulnerabilities in the security protocols that need to be addressed. While some incidents may be due to pilot error, the frequency of these breaches points to a potential systemic issue. The security of the president is paramount, and it's crucial to ensure that all necessary measures are in place to prevent unauthorized access to restricted airspace.
You would think that after the first few incidents, they would have implemented stricter measures. But it seems like the problem persists, and that's not reassuring.
Right. It highlights the need for ongoing evaluation and improvement of security protocols to stay ahead of potential threats and adapt to changing circumstances.
And shifting our attention to Nigeria once again, that clash of cultures in Oyo State reveals the complexities of balancing tradition with individual rights. You have the Alaafin of Oyo designate imposing a curfew as part of his coronation, and then you have an Islamic group criticizing it as an infringement on their freedom of movement.
This situation really highlights the challenges that arise when traditional practices clash with modern concepts of individual rights and freedoms. It's a delicate balance trying to respect cultural customs while also ensuring that the rights of all citizens are protected. It requires open dialogue, understanding, and a willingness to find solutions that accommodate both tradition and individual liberties.
It's a reminder that societies are constantly evolving, and that sometimes traditions need to be re-examined in light of changing values and priorities.
Absolutely, it's an ongoing process of negotiation and adaptation.
And that late-night incident near the White House where Secret Service agents shot a man described as suicidal, it raises concerns about the security measures around the White House and the difficult decisions that law enforcement officers face in such situations.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that even the most heavily guarded locations are not immune to potential threats. The Secret Service has a tremendous responsibility in protecting the president and other high-profile individuals, and these incidents underscore the challenges and risks involved in that task. It also raises questions about the use of force by law enforcement and the need for clear protocols to guide their actions in such situations.
And the fact that the man was reportedly suicidal adds another layer to this story. It highlights the importance of mental health awareness and the need for support systems to help individuals who are struggling with such issues.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that behind every headline there's a human story, and often these stories involve complex issues that require compassion and understanding.
You know, it's interesting how that incident near the White House where the Secret Service shot that armed man brings to light the complex issue of mental health. While those security measures are crucial, it also highlights the need to address those underlying factors that can lead individuals to such desperate acts.
Absolutely. You know, it reminds us that security isn't just about physical barriers and armed guards. It's also about addressing those societal issues like mental health, poverty, and lack of opportunity that can contribute to instability and violence.
So if we take a step back and look at all the headlines we've discussed today, what are some of the key takeaways? What's the bigger picture here?
Well, one thing that really stands out to me is the interconnectedness of these events. Whether it's escalating tensions in the Korean Peninsula, trade disputes between nations, or security incidents in different parts of the world, these events don't happen in isolation. They're all part of a complex global landscape where actions in one place can have ripple effects across the globe.
It's like a giant web where everything is connected, and even seemingly small events can trigger a chain reaction.
Exactly, and it underscores the need for global cooperation and diplomacy to address these challenges. No single nation can solve these problems alone. It requires collaboration and a willingness to find common ground.
Another takeaway for me is the importance of critical thinking and media literacy. With so much information bombarding us from all directions, it's essential to be discerning consumers of news and information.
Oh, absolutely. We need to be able to evaluate sources, identify biases, and distinguish between facts and opinions. It's about developing the skills to navigate the information landscape and form our own informed conclusions.
And it's not just about staying informed. It's about engaging with the world around us. Whether it's through voting, advocating for change, or simply having meaningful conversations with others, we all have a role to play in shaping the future.
That's where it gets really interesting. Because knowledge is only powerful when it's applied, when it inspires action and drives positive change.
So as we wrap up our exploration of today's headlines, I'd like to leave our listeners with a final thought. The world is facing complex challenges, but it's also full of opportunities for those who are willing to engage, to learn, and to make a difference.
And remember, even small actions can have a ripple effect, so never underestimate the power of your voice and your choices.
Thank you for listening to the Today's Top News Headlines on IAM Free Radio and Podcast.